Thank you, thank you, thank you. I feel very welcome because we were trying to figure out if, is this working? Yes. We were trying to figure out if I have been 6 or 7 times to Ukraine. I'm not kidding, and we still haven't figured out if it was 6 or 7 times. So I'm almost Ukrainian. Speaking of, I would like to test who in this room is not from Ukraine. Because remember, keep this face in mind and tell me what bottle does not make you look like that face you just saw. Is it that bottle that makes you look like the guy? Is it that bottle that makes you look like that guy? Yeah. And what about that bottle? The best or the healthiest or the unhealthiest? Okay, I can tell. So I'm, again, I've been here 6 or 7 times and I bought this bottle and that bottle. And then, okay, so I'm the only foreigner in this room. This is great. To start this talk in an old-fashioned Ruby meditation style, I have to give you an outline, so I'm not going to have any jokes in this talk because there was no time. There will be a few diagrams. One unicorn. If you spot the unicorn, you can get a Trailblazer sticker. It's about this big. Not the unicorn, the sticker. There is going to be 2 summaries, and when you see the first summary, you usually think the talk is over, but it's not. So, and then we'll have some more diagrams probably. Some confused scientists will pop up. A lot of pseudocode and diagrams as well. Like there's like about diagrams. What? Only here 3. I forgot to put it in. Oh, I'm sorry. So the amazing new thing about Trailblazer 2.1 is that we changed the mission statement to this. Thank you very much. You were a great audience. Lightning talks. Because the problem was no one could understand what is a high-level architecture, I think the advanced business logic framework is hitting the nail. Actually, I already noticed that we are missing 2 very important words. It's great and grow, because great and grow seems to be the thing in Ukraine to engage people. Okay, this is our good friend Mihailo from last time I was here in February. And I think I started the talk last time with the same discussion. This is when he asked me, why the fuck did you change Trailblazer 2.0? Why did you change the complete API and we all have to rewrite our applications? And then I said, because I can .com. And I was giving this discussion and rant about you should change, you should break code, because if some stuff you have invented starts to suck, there's no point in dragging on something that sucks for another 10 years, and so on and so on and so on. And how else would you start a talk and a rant with if it's not a DHH tweet? So the problem in this photo we just saw and in the Ruby community in general is kind of encapsulated in this tweet. So this is DHH, and it's actually not, this tweet is not a big problem, but like he's basically talking about that active support array prepend or something gets merged into Ruby core, and how awesome this is, and that active support should be like the leading guideline for Ruby features and this kind of stuff. I thought about responding, so I started typing, who needs strict typing, pattern matching, modern concurrency method, overloading, better keyword arguments, macros, real namespaces, and packages, functions, not closures, an end to the monkey patching insanity, removal of auto-loading once and for all, world peace, and a new fair world order. When you can have array prepend. And then I didn't tweet it because I forgot to include immutable data structures. And it was a bit too long. So what I'm trying to say is that the guy on the right-hand side is very beautiful and I want to marry him. No, what I'm trying to say is, and I will start the next talk again with this topic, is if there's no point in adding little features and adding little fixes and you know, like maybe have a little restructuring just to keep the same API and to be backward compatible and to be you know, to look good and stable and semantic versioning and all this kind of stuff. If you build something and you figure out it does not suit my needs and my users' needs anymore, then break your API and invent something new, okay? And this is exactly what we did with Trailblazer, but not in 2.1. We only added features. Okay, so I want to take you on a quick trip about this thing called Trailblazer. This is the first version of my book cover. As you can see, I was pretty creative with Minecraft, and I think it's Comic Sans or something, the font. So this is a little bit about Trailblazer 1.1, just quickly, because we only have 2.5 hours left. So what the main point about Trailblazer was, is I want more abstractions. And I also claim that we need more abstractions in Ruby or in, I don't want to limit myself to Rails, because I think we need more abstractions in our language in general. So what we did in Trailblazer was we added abstractions, and so suddenly we had emptier controllers, we also had emptier models, we also had emptier views. We added those set abstractions like form objects and operations and blah blah twins and whatever. And there's also a lot of other stuff we added. I had no idea that is going to be important at some point or whatever. But yeah, so we added new places for code, and by adding new places for code, you make other places less codey, if that's a word. And we also introduced a new file structure for those new places of code, yeah, and we kind of inversed the file style, so we have the concept name and then the technology, and not the technology and then the concept name. You know, in Rails you have like app controller, blah blah blah, app model, blah blah blah. So we kind of do it the opposite way. We say like app comment, and then we have the controller. I mean, we don't have controllers in Trailblazer, but you get the idea. So that was the kind of one of the big changes, and people were, of course, very suspicious. Like, oh, app? What? You changed the app structure? Are you crazy? No one is going to understand. It was no problem. People got it. So what also happened was that by introducing the new abstractions, controllers that used to look like this, I mean, we know that we have to put business logic into controllers, right? We learned that from Max talk. So controllers that look like this basically look like this. I mean, it's not that beautiful everywhere, but at least you get the idea. Some code was shifted to some new place, and that place is, in this case, an operation that is called blog post create. And models that used to look like this, I mean, this is just a really nice example I could show. The screen would probably break. So this kind of model would probably look like this, because we only want to have persistence in the model. I was the one raising the hand when Max asked, is model for persistence? So we use the good parts of Active Record, and we drop all the bad parts, like callbacks, business logic, decoration stuff. This should not be in the model. Active Record is great for joins and for queries and finders. We got a sniper in the room. But wait, I got the laser pointer as well. And we added stuff like contract, so like form objects, for example. I'm not going to go into the details, but instead of throwing your validations into models, you have them in dedicated new objects. And we added something like the operation, which is again an explicit new place for code. So you basically add all the business logic or the orchestration of business logic in a new class. And people were freaking out, like, how can you add so many classes to Rails? Rails was great, and MVC was enough, and we don't need the file structure, and we don't need empty controllers, and we don't need empty models, and we don't need form objects. And man, you guys are crazy. You like, MVC has been great for the last 10 years. Our app sucks, but whatever. So yeah, we gave them new abstractions, and I don't know. You can see like it's still kind of messy in the operation. Like you still have a lot of code that is like a lot of control code. If the validation works, then do this and that. If the validation did not work, do this, do something else, and so on. But at least there was a new kind of place for code. Yeah, so you kind of get the idea. We wanted to clean up with, I mean, we didn't want to break existing architectures, but we wanted to extend MVC, and we kind of, I think it kind of was reasonable. Yeah, and if you don't like contracts, you don't use contracts. If you don't like operations, you don't use operations, but then you're an idiot. Whatever. So this is the current cover of the book. It has improved slightly. Only cost me 1,300 euros. But so the book came out. Lots of people started to read it, to buy it, and it was great. And lots of critics, of course, but lots of people were kind of intrigued by the idea, and they started to use Trailblazer in production, in really big projects, because you can introduce it afterwards. You don't have to rewrite everything, which is a great benefit. And yeah, so Trailblazer 2.0 broke some API, because you saw the operation I just showed was a bit messy. So we had to do something about it, so we restructured the way operations work, and a lot of people hated us for that, or hated me because I'm responsible for it. But 2 weeks later they said, hey, that's awesome, it's so much fun, it's great. So yeah, but I had to do lots of discussions, and then there's funny stuff like, I mean, people still buy the book, or even though the book is free now. You can see September 7th, that's yesterday. And right after buying the book, this person sends me a message via LeanPub, and it's like, hey Nick, you're awesome, you're crazy cool, thank you so much. No, it's like, when will we have the second version of the book? That's how nice people can be in the open source community, when they pay you money. So the thing about Trailblazer 2.0 is it's basically the same, a little bit different, a little bit restructured, because we saw, oh, there's something that does not work as good as it could work, let's change it. So again, without details, because I think I talked about this stuff last time for like 5 hours, and you were all there. I totally remember all the faces, so I don't have to go into details here. So basically what we did, we still have the operation, we still use namespacing and all this kind of stuff, but instead of having to structure the control flow manually with like if and else and nesting and calling methods, you basically have a declarative DSL that allows you to say, do this, then do that, then do that. If that goes wrong, do something else and skip the rest and this kind of stuff. So you have this step, and there's a little bit more on this API, but basically you say what happens in what order, and then you implement the actual step logic with methods or with callable objects or whatever. And basically what you do when you use this API is that you create some kind of workflow that executes step by step by step, and if some step returns false, it will jump to the what we call error track, and then you can add steps on the error track, and the rest of the success or happy path will be skipped automatically. Yeah, as you see it in this amazing animations. I'm pretty good at animated GIFs, as you can see. I use GIMP and LibreOffice, and this is the result. Oh, thank you. Oh, I'm blushing. So that was a huge change. Keep looking at it. It's like there's like a hidden message in it, and you will all be hypnotized and whatever. So that was the huge change in Trailblazer 2.0. Yeah. So by using this new step API, you got some automatic workflow. So Trailblazer kind of took away a lot of code and a lot of work for the developers, because you don't have to worry about, I don't know, assign current user, should that method be called right now? Because Trailblazer will make sure it's only called when the flow requires it to be called. So we kind of started to worry about flow control, yeah? And that was only because in Trailblazer 1, we kind of set the bar for a new kind of structuring of apps in general, yeah? New file structure, new abstractions. Slowly, the Ruby community would kind of get the idea. Luckily, there were lots of projects like Hanami or DryRB at the same time, so the acceptance was growing, yeah? And suddenly, people would listen to us at conferences, which is awesome. You should try it. So after this kind of was sorted, we could move on to new stuff, which is let Trailblazer take over flow control, because I'm not interested in if else, nest. Yeah. So this is basically what we introduced in 2.0, and people started to really like the idea after they changed their old code to the new code. Actually, funny story, we also have a gem that allows you to run 1.1 and 2.0 in the same application. You can upgrade stepwise, and it works because I'm using it myself. Because upgrading sucks. What we also did, in addition to this flow control thing, is that we introduced the idea of only one mutable object in the flow per operation, basically. So funny enough, that dry RB, also Hanami, is doing kind of the same, or following the same idea of having as little mutable objects as possible. Yeah. So in basically mutating an object means you're writing to a hash, or you changing some value on an existing object instead of creating a new one, for example. So how that looks in Trailblazer is, I was talking about this step DSL, and every step needs to be a method or a callable object, and they always have the same API that starts with the so-called context or options object. Yeah, the first argument is always the mutable object, and then you write data to that object, and that's the only way to communicate with other steps and with the outer world in general. Yeah, I know it's really boring. And so after you write stuff in the operation, you can do this in several places, and you can read from this hash as well. After you write this and you run this operation, you all remember this funny way of calling operations. There's only the call method. So after you run the operation, you get the result object, and from the result object, you can read those values. So this one mutable options object is the only way to write and to transport state throughout your application flow. And this was a fantastic thing to do. I mean, I have done lots of stuff that I regret. I'm not talking about the alcohol and that stuff. The introduction of this single mutable object that is passed from step to step and from operation to operation, and being the only writable object. I mean, you can still use instance variables and stuff if you want that, but people don't do it, was great, because now you have amazing control about what got changed where. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. So we did flow control, and we introduced this context object in Trailblazer 2.0, basically. And that was exciting stuff. But who would I be if I wouldn't change my own stuff all the time? Or if I wouldn't add stuff to existing gems all the time? Because it's fun to make people having to learn stuff continuously. So a couple of, let's say 6 months ago, was when we started to work on Trailblazer 2.1. Yeah, so we now have the beautiful structure, abstraction layers, flow control. We have this one mutable object. What else would we need? More flow control. Why? So the reason I wanted more flow control is because I'm still working for the police. I play bass now. No, I mean, the actual police in Germany, they use Trailblazer. Stop laughing. And it's actually, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the police, like this institution and you know, like brutality and this kind of stuff. But the project is incredibly interesting because it's about security background checks for people. Yeah, so if you want to work at an airport, for example, the German government has to make sure you're not a terrorist, and so they find a lot of things about you, like if you're, I don't know, if you have any debts because you could be bribed, or if you still have your driver license and this kind of stuff. So you need to ask lots of systems and make sure everything is processed properly. So it's incredibly complex workflows, and I already said the word workflow. So this kind of initiated some change in the way I think about software. By the way, you should check out this band if you've never heard it. You're missing out. So this is code I'm absolutely not allowed to show you, but I don't care. So you can see there's a German comment saying "to do, remove that shit." So they are using lots of they have incredibly complex workflows. Stop looking at it; it's secret. And so what they did is when you have workflows and state machines, you automatically use active state machine or active model transitions, right? Because that's how we do it in Ruby. So in Ruby, I'm going to rant about this later. What they did, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 states. Because in Ruby, we always want to have states, and then you have some kind of transition between those states. And that is how apparently how we build complex workflows and state machines in Ruby. So that was their central element for the entire system. And then you had lots of code. Again, this is super secret, and you're probably going to hack Germany now because you know how the police does background checks. And they have lots of, so this is kind of the code that hooks into that event state machine thing. And you can see there's lots of, if this is, then do that. If that is, do that. So they have lots of control code to check if that transition, when that transition is initiated, if they should run this code or that code. So basically, I mean, I don't even understand it anymore what they did, but the entire code base was full of control flow code. And at every step they would test 5 times, am I allowed to restart or to create a new request inquiry or to change my status? And there was so much code redundant and doing the same thing over and over. Like there were thousands of lines of control code to make sure things happen in the right order. Yeah, this is just one example out of 200 files. What's great about working for a governmental institution is they have so much documentation. It's incredible. I mean, I'm not kidding. They have so many documents that discuss what this software does, why the software does it, and how it's supposed to work. So I asked my colleague for like, hey, can you help me with this state machine thing? Like I'm trying to figure out the actual flow. And then he gave me this this diagram. We're talking about a massively complex system. And he said, yeah, this is how it works. These are the states we need. And then like I'm looking at him like, really? And he said, no, this is actually the correct thing. Like this is how the states work. And it's literally like, these are all allowed transitions. And then I looked at him again like, man, are you kidding? He's like, yes. And then, this is bullshit. I have no fucking idea what this software does. It's your job to figure out. So they had those diagrams that were completely senseless because someone started with active model transition. And I don't know for what reason, it kind of makes you think about workflows the wrong way. So yeah, they had shitloads of control code everywhere just because they wanted to use active model transitions, which is good. I mean, use gems, but use the right gems. And so I found lots of documents. Again, this is super classified and everything. So they actually had real diagrams for the workflows of this background check. Yeah, so you can see there was someone who's not a programmer drawing diagrams. And those diagrams, they are, again, you can see my notes and everything. I have terrible handwriting because I do too much programming. They were closer to reality than the code diagrams. I mean, 5 states with 10 arrows is not describing a software system pretty well. So, but those documents, again, were completely outdated. And like, I found some systems, they already used the so-called Bpmn standard I'm going to talk about soon. So you could kind of see, okay, this is what it's supposed to do, and this is the order of the steps and the order of the inquiries and of the processing and stuff. But they were all completely outdated. And if you looked at the code, it was impossible to see how this code relates to the actual implementation. So I started to draw my own diagrams, what I think the code should do, and started to discuss that with one of my colleagues and with my team lead, who's not a programmer. And this brought me to this thing called Bpmn, because what I used for drawing this stuff was a Bpmn editor. Only because it's awesome, it's got this snap to grid feature, so everything you draw looks good automatically. And then I realized, hey, this Bpmn stuff is actually pretty cool. Like it's not because I can draw stuff and it looks good. It's also like there were people thinking about how to model workflows and state machines properly. And I don't have to think about all those elements myself. I just use something that exists. Yeah. And what what was really scary was that I tried to find BPMN implementations in Ruby. In Java, you find 500. And I'm not saying this is good. Oh, you're getting sick, my little boy. So in Ruby, we have nothing with BPMN. It's like, we don't need that. We have acts as state machine. And that's exactly how workflows should be done. I had 5 minutes with that gem, and I thought, what the hell is that gem trying to represent? Because this is not how I design workflows. Workflows are not centered around models. Workflows are application-wide, and they might involve lots of other models, and they might have transitions that have nothing to do with a database. Yeah? So why the hell would we define workflows on the database level, which is the model in Ruby, in Rails? So it was always, the question was always, how do I get to some state that I can store in the database? That's kind of the idea of AASM, or about active model transition. And not about how do I actually get to some state, because that is the problem. Like, I don't care if something is ready or not. I want to know what steps do I have to do to make something ready. So, and that was kind of the pivotal moment when I realized that this BPMN and acts as state machine absolutely does not work together. Yeah, and to understand what I'm talking about, we should check out BPMN a little bit, and you also, of course, you have to use Shutterstock or something with like a fucking stupid businessman, because BPMN is business process model notation, and it's from the Java world, and it's enterprise, and banks use it, and insurance companies use it, and the army uses it, which sucks, and rocket scientists use it. So it can't be good because it's enterprise, and in Ruby, enterprise is bad. Yeah, we want to code, we want to hack, we want to write cool stuff, and we get like 3 billion funding, like Basecamp and whatever. Like, this is how we roll. We don't want to have enterprise. And this is kind of stupid. This is a little bit like, in Ruby, in the community, we're constantly rejecting stuff that is amazing, yeah? For, I don't know, like Ruby, the language is 20 years behind of other languages that have concurrency, that have all this kind of stuff I was listing, but we don't need that in Ruby. Ruby is easy, simple, we want that simplicity. Why would I use something enterprise if I can write it myself? Like, this is a little bit like saying, like, I don't like jazz music, I'm a punk rocker, fuck that shit. Like, you can learn so much from jazz music, for just as an example, that I don't know why we always reject good ideas that have a reasonable foundation, yeah? So, I don't know, I started to dive into that BPMN, and it's lots of diagrams, and it's also lots of bullshit. Like, it's not that everything in BPMN is amazing and you should know it inside out, but the idea is basically, how am I defining workflows of my application, workflows that go beyond, creating some blog post or something, workflows that go from the first day of the application to the last day of the application, and that define every occasion, every edge case, and the transitions and the state changes. So it's lots of boxes and stuff. I actually listed what you have to know. It's like circles, you have to know arrows, unicorns, and here it is. And that's basically all you need to know about BPMN. The boxes are tasks, the circles are events, the arrows are transitions. I haven't found more than one unicorn yet, but maybe we can insert some new element. So that's basically what you need to know as a basic components. And then you have what they call pools or swim lanes, which is you have one, this is called a swim lane. This is per actor. Yeah, an actor in BPMN can be anything. It can be a logged-in user. It can be a moderator for a block. It can be an administrator. It can also be a cache service or a mailer daemon. Yeah, it can be anything, any abstract or concrete concept of your domain. And then you kind of define the life cycles, and you connect the life cycles of different actors or swim lanes. When I'm going to talk about events very, very soon. So that's basically all you need to know about BPMN. I can already tell you love it. Eh? You want to draw boxes and unicorns and stuff. I know. Yeah. So, and what's really intriguing about, I haven't heard this ringtone in many years. Nostalgic. What's really cool about BPMN is that it's really close to programming itself. Like, you have what we would call it a function or a method. Like, you can have a box, and you see the plus in the box, and that basically means I am an activity, you call those boxes tasks or activities or processes. I never know when to call it a task or a process or an activity. And no one knows when to call it like that, so you can call it task, process, activity, doesn't matter. So basically this means I am a complex task myself. So basically you can zoom into that thing and it'll be another diagram, yeah? So basically like when you call a function in Ruby or a method, you get a result, and in Bpmn you call a subprocess and you get a result, but you know that the result comes from some nested process again. It's pretty cool. Don't get confused by this swim lane. I'm only talking about this box. I was just too lazy to make proper slides. This is also a scan, and then I use GIMP to cut out this section from the screenshot, and it's horrible. Another thing that's really cool in Bpmn is, I mean, you have those boxes, you have connections, it's pretty easy to understand. You have this nesting thing. You have end events, yeah? So every flow can end in one or more than one end events, which is this fat, dark circle. And those end events are basically what we think of when we think of states in Ruby, yeah? An active state machine. For example, if something is saved, persisted, and valid, you end in some state success, yeah? Just make an example here. This activity I call blah, which is a pretty descriptive name. So in this example, I have 3 possible outcomes: success, invalid, and wrong encoding. Yeah, you're not limited to true or false or something. And what's really cool about Bpmn, and this is the last thing you have to remember, is now I'm combining the nesting with end events, is that you can have, so you remember this amazingly complex activity blah. So here in this case, I'm zooming out of that activity blah, and then you can connect the different outcomes to the outer process, yeah? So it's basically like calling a Ruby method, and then if the result is that, go here. If the result was that, go here. So Bpmn already thought about this kind of stuff and made it really, really simple. And I mean, it's not like, I was saying that yesterday, like I could show diagrams in Bpmn to my mother, and she would kind of understand what goes on without being like a super hardcore developer like everyone in this room. Yeah, so you have boxes, arrows, you have this nesting, and you can have end events that can be connected to further flows. And what they also have is a really, really important thing is you can, so the concept of events is really, really important in Bpmn. But it's a bit misleading, the name event. Actually, it's not misleading, but it's up to you to decide. So you can also throw various events during an activity. Yeah, for example, I do some stuff, I check the form. If the form is correct, I email a user. And you can see this is a throw event because it's a black letter and not a white letter. If it's a white letter, it's a catch event. So you throw this event called email user, and then other systems or other activities can catch this event. You can see because now it's a white envelope, and act upon this event and do other stuff. So you can connect parts of your system without having to physically connect them with events. Don't worry if you do not understand all the implications right now. It took me a little bit, but it's incredibly helpful. And I mean, to summarize all this kind of stuff, it took me a little bit to understand how to use events and how to model them into my problem domain. But to sum this up, in Bpmn, I don't know, Bpmn is like 20 years old or 25 or something, and there was version 1, version 2, breaking change, by the way, and and there are lots of like massive projects using this standard to describe their workflows, and this has 2 benefits. First of all, the programmer knows what the hell they are doing, and secondly, you can discuss workflows with business people. As I said, my mom, she's not a business person, hell no, but she understands. She basically understands this kind of diagram intuitively, and that's the whole point about Bpmn, that you make people understand workflows intuitively. I don't have to argue about this if and that else and this return. I say, I have this, and then we go here. And people say, yeah, but actually we should go here. And I say, okay, then I move this event here. Done. I mean, I still have to program it, but that's another problem. Yeah, so Bpmn has its absolute benefits when it comes to communication. This was kind of the one of the workflows in my current project, which is a really, really small project, but of course we use Bpmn again and Trailblazer. And you can see there's like a couple of tasks, a couple of, let's go back. There's like events waiting for stuff to happen. And that's basically it, yeah? So you might wonder, why am I not wearing a suit, working for Oracle, and explaining Bpmn to other people in suits? How is this related to what I do? The thing is, I was playing with Bpmn and the idea only on diagrams. And after about a few, I don't know if it was minutes or hours, I realized, okay, we have this operation, yeah? This is basically a task or an activity in Bpmn. We have this DSL that creates some kind of workflow. You know, you remember my beautiful animated GIF. And yeah, here we go. This is basically what this DSL creates. This beautiful workflow can also be, sorry, no. Exactly, here we go. You remember the workflow? Yeah, this one. It's very, very simple. There's only 2 tracks, and you can jump to the left track and so on. People started to ask, I want to break out of my operation in the first step if this and that happens, or I want to go back from the arrow track to the happy path if this and that happens. So they were asking for, like, this is only one of the many issues we have on GitHub. They were asking, I want to have a richer workflow. I want to change my state machine diagram, but you don't give me the API. So what do you do in Rails? You would say, doesn't work. We'll fix it in 5 or 10 years. What we did is we decided, okay, maybe our underlying mental image is too limited and we need to rewrite everything internally. And that's what we did. Because what they wanted was, I want to go here, 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 this, blah. So we basically like the idea of operations with the happy and the arrow track, but we want to do a lot of other stuff. Of course, this is the request of 4 people, because every person thought, I only want to go here. And the next one said, I only want to go here. And the next one said, I only want to go here. So if you are the maintainer of the project, you kind of see a pattern. And the pattern says, my abstraction is wrong. Let's change it. Because, I mean, I sat there thinking, why are so many people complaining that they want more features? Maybe we are just doing it wrong. And I got back to my beautiful, what? Oh. I got back to this, to the operation, yeah? The really simple DSL. People like it. You can also write or draw this following Bpmn like this. So I realized actually every operation is an activity in Bpmn, and it's very simple. Actually, it's way more readable now than it was in my animated GIF. Maybe I should animate this as well. So you can see there's the happy path, here's the error track, and if something goes wrong in assign current user, it'll go to log error and then end in end failure. Otherwise, it'll end in end success. So here we have Bpmn basically in Trailblazer. But the problem was we couldn't add additional endings. For example, in assign current user, I could also say something is really wrong. Let's go to user missing. Yeah, different end. And it's skipping all the rest of the operation. So this was impossible in 2.0. But we wanted it. I mean, other people wanted it. I didn't want it. Yeah? I'm okay with like MVC. So the other thing that worked perfectly well with Bpmn and Trailblazer was, if this is the comment create activity, then I can totally use that end event wiring, because we also have different ends in an operation. We already have that in 2.0. And then we can create more complex flows with like operation going to another operation, throwing an event and this kind of stuff by reusing our concept of end events. That was, again, something where I saw, hey, cool, maybe we should really spend some time rewriting stuff so that we can follow or more or less implement some Bpmn standards in Trailblazer. Oh, this is so beautiful. So here's I decided not to show you everything about police. So this is just some thing I made up just for the fun of drawing diagrams with snap to grid. Like you create a comment, then you notify a moderator. So the moderator, I don't know how this works, but like if it's moderated, you check, is it approved? Yeah, then notify the guy who wrote the comment, then publish the comment, then expire the cache, just as an example, and then you're done and everything is great. If, for example, you create a comment and there's no current user, you log a security breach, and you end in unauthorized. You can't read it because I'm stupid and was using font size 7 point on a big screen, which is great. So this is like a typical example of you have thousands of those workflows in every application. And just to make it a little bit more complicated, I also drew the workflow for a moderator. Yeah, there is something to moderate, review the comment, are there swear words? If yes, then reject it, and then we end in the rejected state. If not, then approve, and we ended the approve end state. And you can also add more stuff like the cache expiry mechanism. This is just a lame example, but if we hit this event, this workflow will automatically be triggered. This is just to give you an idea how more complex distributed systems could look like in Bpmn. I love drawing diagrams. I did like at least 500 or 1,000 diagrams in the last couple of months. So if you need help for the next presentation, let me know. I can draw them. So I think after all the diagrams, you want to see some code. The good news about Trailblazer 2.1 is you don't need to code because because we have this new product. It's a product, paid product. So I'm finally going to be rich and can fly to Ukraine with my own jet next time. We have this editor. It's a Trailblazer editor.trailblazer.to. It's alpha. Don't go there and don't subscribe. And you can basically draw application-wide workflows in this editor. And this editor, it has a lot of cool features, and some of them don't really work yet. But you draw this diagram, and then you can export. Hang on. You can. Oh, it doesn't show the export. So you can export this to an actual activity. And the cool thing about the editor is it doesn't create magic compiled code or something. It just creates a structure, and it doesn't really matter what the structure does, but it creates a structure in Ruby that is saved in a file, and you could change that structure manually if you want. But the idea is that the editor creates those creates the control code. What? Do you want to read the data structure? Oh, here we go. That's because I can. So I mean, the problem is always you want to show something. Like I want to show you guys, this is no magic happening. Like you're generating something. This is creating a hash and an array and some symbols, and you like see this fucking deprecated macro. So anyway, so I draw this diagram. I mean, this is all like maybe like working flawlessly in a couple of weeks. But you draw this diagram, you export it to some Ruby file, and this is the control flow code in Ruby sitting on your production machine or wherever, or development machine. And then you can. This is all pseudocode because yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to talk about internals for the next 15 minutes. You basically say, hey, Trailblazer, start with the comment create operation. In case you forgot where this is the first one. I mean, this is not the actual API, but this is kind of the idea. Like you start somewhere, you say trigger the comment create activity. And then the machine will run and run and run and call all your code until it stops, and you don't have to worry about, is my code actually called in the right order? Am I allowed to call this? Because Trailblazer does that for you. So for example, here, it runs till moderation needed, and then it saves a session because you need a session, but it's a very simple session, and it calculates some event ID, blah, blah, blah. Let's look at the diagram. You will know what I mean. I trigger comment create, and it either runs this way. In my example, it is successful, goes here, notifies the moderators, and then stops in moderation needed. And that's when the Ruby process basically is finished, yeah? Because I mean, we don't have the process engine in Trailblazer is not stateful. Like it doesn't run over the entire lifetime of your application. It's just running when you run a controller. The process engine will run the process and stop, and it's done, yeah? So it'll stop in moderation needed and kind of remember this was where I stopped. I don't know. The next couple of slides are a bit messy, but. So it basically remembers we stopped in moderation needed. Here is an event ID for this event. So Trailblazer computes, or I think you have to do it manually at the moment, but it doesn't matter. The point is you need some very long, not guessable identifier to trigger the next event for that session. Yeah, so I compute this UUID in the moderation needed state. And the moderation needed state is supposed, I'm really good at GIMP as well. If you want to have consulting, the moderation needed is supposed, this event is a throw event, is supposed to trigger that event. Moderation needed catch event. It's a white envelope, don't worry. And how does that work? Well, in order to trigger this event, yeah, for the moderation process, you of course, why is it so? The transitions are horrible. So in order to, in order to trigger the this event for the session we were just talking about, you again need this long event. You need to know the event ID, of course, to continue where you stopped up here. And that's the whole, basically the whole secret about how Trailblazer's workflow engine works, is that if you know the event ID, you can basically continue something from that event or wherever you are without having to know anything about who was the current user or where were I before or am I allowed to go there. You just have to know the event ID, done. And for example, this is again pseudocode, so just to give you an example of what that looks like. If I want to trigger the event to start the moderation process, I would basically trigger blah, 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 this long UUID, and Trailblazer will get the session and will start to run from that event and stop somewhere else, give you another event ID, and so on. So it's super simple, basically. And don't worry if you don't really understand that, because this stuff is used in one application only, which is the police. But this will be kind of the breaking, not breaking, groundbreaking, this is better. The groundbreaking addition to the Trailblazer 2.0. Yeah? So in order to trigger that event, I need the ID, and the process engine will automatically run and continue with whatever it has to do. I said something about session. Don't look at this too long, it's bullshit. But I talked about session. So at some point you need to tell Trailblazer, hey, please, for the next invocation, when we continue from somewhere, please remember, for example, the comment ID. So you need to have a little bit of serialization code. And it doesn't matter that this is an event, and it also doesn't matter that it's derived from blah, 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 and it doesn't matter where you put this, but you need a little bit of serialization and deserialization code. So you have to tell Trailblazer, this is how I'm going to remember my current user. This is how I'm going to remember what comment I was processing, for example, but that's it. So there's a little bit of serialized, deserialized code necessary. And this slide sucks. I was thinking about not showing it, but then I knew if I not show it, people will ask me, how does Trailblazer know about the session? Okay, and this is like, works roughly like this. Okay, so forget about all the stuff with events and IDs and Trailblazer process engine. The whole point is you run away and never come back. The whole point is you define your workflows not in code, you define your workflows in Bpmn standard graphically. Trailblazer takes over making sure that those things are called in the right order, that those things are called the way they want to be called, and that the arguments are being passed properly and this kind of stuff. Yeah? You only implement the actual steps. And just as an example, the notify moderators step is just a callable object. It could also be a lambda, or it could be so many people walking around here, it's great. So a step or a task or an activity or a process, it's all the same. Callable object, same API as we have everywhere in Trailblazer, mutable object and keyword arguments, blah, 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 blah. What you do in that step is absolutely up to you. You can use RabbitMQ messaging, you can use Kafka, Karafka, whatever you want. You can use, here I use Active Record to do some stuff. So the point is the code, how you implement those tasks, those boxes, is totally up to you. But Trailblazer makes sure this box gets called with the right input and the right output, and make sure the output is correct for you. You don't have to make sure this stuff is properly done. Yeah, so imagine all this control flow code being done manually in your application. If you do not want to vomit right now, then you're doing it right. Okay, where are we? So operations are basically beautiful activities or tasks or processes in BPMN. We have this lovely basic railway workflow we do standardly, but lots of people also want to have additional wiring. I showed you one of the GitHub issues, and so the DSL got extended, so you can say if the user missing symbol constant is, like, it's called a signal. If that signal is emitted, then go to user missing to the end, blah, blah, blah. So what it basically does is it'll end this edge and end user missing. So this is this is basically the only change in Trailblazer 2.1 that you can have more wiring. Ah, it's so beautiful. I mean, I dream about diagrams, circles, arrows, it's great. So here's a summary I was promising. Hi. So the point about this new addition, the workflow engine and everything is you only worry about the steps, the tasks, the implementation, not the control flow. Yeah, and you can use activities and operations and wire them together and compose them and nest them and everything. But you don't have to worry about when is it called and how is it called. That is Trailblazer's problem, and it's a great relief. And you don't design the control flow with crazy Ruby. You can do it if you want. Deprecated macro.rb. You design it with our amazing editor that only costs euros per month. Cling! And I was only talking about like the implementation, but what this change brings with it is we now have really cool debugging. I was too lazy to do a slide for debugging. And we also have amazing tracing now. So if I don't understand what the hell is going on in my workflow or in my operation, I can use tracing, and tracing will basically render or print on a console, print the path the logic took to what end, and tell me about the input and the output parameters, and it's super easy to find why an operation took some specific path, why it ended on user missing and not on success, for example. So the tracing and the debugging is in my opinion, putting development to a new level. Like you haven't seen. I mean, once this stuff gets launched, it'll definitely change the way lots of people work, because it's a little bit like when I saw the React talk with this cool debugger, and you can like write in the application and things change automatically. Like, I also want this kind of tools in Ruby, and this is what this kind of stuff brings, hopefully. I don't know why this is, there's another diagram, but it doesn't matter. Some more things about Trailblazer that we added is we also worked on some other gems, like for example Trailblazer tests. So in Trailblazer 2.0 you had those huge massive tests with lots of code, and with using Trailblazer test, this is like 2 lines of code doing the exact same thing but safer. So yeah, we also do other stuff. We worked on the Trailblazer developer gem. Those who were in my workshop yesterday, they were breathless, because you can literally push an operation via the developer gem to the editor, and it will render this operation graphically in the editor. You were there and you loved it, right? Yeah. So this is another cool thing. Like, it kind of visualizes our work on a day-to-day basis. Like this, for example. This was what we rendered, and I was like, wow, this works. And I'm not going to talk about tracing. I'm not going to talk about debugging, because it's coming. And I want you to know that we now have a Facebook page. And if you follow that Facebook page, you're following another useless page on Facebook. But we actually publish a lot of information about, like, literally twice every week we post something about what we do, because Twitter is shit for information. I don't want to blog, so I decided Facebook is pretty cool. And if you follow me on Twitter, I will look more interesting, because I have more followers, but there's no other benefit. So yeah, and if you have questions later at the pub. Thank you.